Dad, give us the farm. My kids demanded. So I sent them an invoice for 30 years of their life. Mary died on a Tuesday. By Friday, we buried her. My kids, Brian and Chloe, flew in Thursday night. They didn't even bother changing from the airport. First class to funeral home. They brought flowers that smelled like plastic and sympathy that smelled the same. I'm sitting at the kitchen table now. The same table where Mary baked pies for 50 years. Where we signed the mortgage papers in 1973. Where she balanced our checkbook every Sunday night with a pencil she kept sharpened to a surgical point. That table has stories soaked into the wood grain. Stories my kids never bothered learning. Brian sits across from me, 50 years old. My son, the lawyer, the legal genius, as he likes to remind everyone at Thanksgiving. He's pushing Mary's tablecloth to the side like it might contaminate his $1,200 suit. Worried about dust, I guess. Or maybe memories weigh too much for a man who bills his time in 6-minute increments. Chloe standing by the window, staring out at the cornfields like they personally offended her. 47, real estate queen, sells houses to rich folks in Omaha who want to pretend they understand rural life. She wrinkles her nose and says it. Actually says it out loud. God, it smells like animals in here. I don't respond. Just watch her. Think to myself, thank God for that, daughter, because you smell like interest rates on other people's mortgages and bad perfume choices, the kind that costs $200 and announces itself before you enter a room. Mary would have said something, would have reminded Chloe this is a working farm, that animals are how we paid for her college, for that fancy marketing degree she used for exactly 3 years before deciding sales was easier. But Mary's not here anymore. So I just sit, watch, listen. They don't waste time. Not even 24 hours after we put their mother in the ground. Brian clears his throat. That lawyer throat clear, that means he's about to deliver prepared remarks. He probably practiced in the rental car. Dad, we need to be realistic. Mom handled everything. The books, the accounts, the planning. You're amazing with the tractor, with the land. But you don't know what EBITDA means. Hell, I'm not sure you know what an LLC is. We need to protect your assets. He says protect like he's doing me a favor, like I should be grateful. Chloe turns from the window. She's got a manila folder. Of course she does. She pulls out glossy brochures. Sunset villas in Florida. Smiling old people playing shuffleboard. Palm trees. Swimming pools shaped like kidneys. He's right, Dad. Look at these. Beautiful communities. You'd love it. Golf every day. No more worrying about equipment breaking down or crop prices. We sell this place, invest the money properly, and you live like a king. We'll handle everything. The sale, the finances, the transition. You just relax. She says this like she invented the concept of retirement. Like I'm some confused old man who needs children to explain how life works. I look at those brochures. At the fake smiles and the manufactured paradise. Then I look around my kitchen. At the dent in the wall from when Brian threw a baseball, threw it in 1982. At the growth chart Mary penciled on the doorframe. At the window of the sink where Mary stood every morning, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise over fields we bought with borrowed money and built with broken backs. They didn't bring sympathy. They brought an eviction notice. The realization hits me slow, like ice forming on a pond. 1 degree at a time, until suddenly it's solid enough to walk on. They planned this. Probably before the funeral. Maybe before Mary even died. I imagine them on the phone. Brian in his office with his law degrees framed behind him. Chloe in her car between showings. Coordinating. Strategizing. Waiting. Brian keeps talking. Something about market conditions. About my age. About how the farm hasn't turned a real profit in years. Which is a lie, but he wouldn't know because he hasn't asked about the farm since the 90s. Chloe's nodding along, adding helpful comments about property values and tax implications. She's already mentally staged my home for sale, probably thinking about which walls to paint gray, whether to rip up Mary's garden for better curb appeal. I don't interrupt, don't argue, just let them talk themselves into a hole they don't even know they're digging. Because here's what they forgot, what they never knew, what Mary made sure of 30 years ago on a night that changed everything. It was 1995. Summer. Brian was in law school. Second year. He came home for a weekend. Borrowed my truck Saturday night. Said he was meeting friends in town. I should have known better. Should have smelled the plan. But you want to trust your kids. Want to believe they learned something from all those talks about responsibility. He came back at 3 a.m, not in my truck, in a police car. The officer was young, apologetic. Said Brian hit a parked car outside Murphy's bar. Said Brian's blood alcohol was .12. Said if we got him a good lawyer fast, maybe they could make some of it disappear. Small town. The right connection still meant something back then. $15,000. That's what it cost. The lawyer, the settlement with the car's owner, the administrative fees that seemed to multiply like rabbits. $15,000 we didn't have. Had to take it from the farm equipment fund. Delayed buying the new combine another year. Made do with the old one that broke down twice at harvest. Brian sat in our kitchen. Same table I'm sitting at now. Mary made him coffee even though she was shaking with anger. I could see it in her hands, the way she gripped the cup too tight. But she made the coffee anyway because that's who she was. I expected remorse. Expected shame. Got something else entirely. Come on, Dad. It's just money. That's what you work for, right? So we kids can have a better start than you did. So we don't have to break our backs on some farm. This is an investment in my future. In a few years, I'll be making 6 figures. I'll pay you back 10 times over. He smiled when he said it. Actually smiled. Like we were lucky to have the opportunity to save his ass. Mary didn't say anything. Just stood at that sink, staring out at those fields, at the investment we'd made in him already. The braces that cost a fortune. The summer camps. The college tuition we were still paying off. The car we bought him that he totaled 2 years later. I watched something change in her face that night. Something crystallize. She finished her coffee, kissed Brian on the forehead like she always did, sent him to bed. Then she went to her desk in the corner, the one she used for farm accounting. For the ledgers she kept more carefully than most people keep family photos. She pulled out a new book, fresh, leather-bound, the kind accountants used before everything went digital. Opened to the first page. Wrote in her perfect Palmer method handwriting. I came up behind her, read over her shoulder. Brian Arthur Henderson. June 15th, 1995. $15,000. Legal fees and related expenses. Loan against future inheritance. Interest rate. Prime plus 3%. She looked up at me. Eyes dry now. Calm. She said something her father taught her. He was a bookkeeper for 40 years. Kept records for half the businesses in the county. Never forgot a number. Never missed a decimal point. Love is a gift, Arthur. Everything else is debits and credits. I didn't fully understand what she meant. Thought maybe it was just grief talking. Just her way of processing what Brian had said. What he'd done. But Mary never forgot a number. Never missed a decimal point. That was 30 years ago. From that night on, Mary kept the books. Every loan. Every time they came back for more. She recorded it all in that leather ledger with her perfect handwriting. I asked her once, years later, why she bothered. We both knew they'd never pay us back. That's what parents do, isn't it? We sacrifice. We give. We don't keep score. She looked at me over those reading glasses. The ones that made her look like a bank president. I'm not keeping score, Arthur. I'm keeping evidence. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. Thought maybe it was just her accountant brain needing to organize things, to keep records, to make sense of chaos through numbers. Mary died last Tuesday. Heart attack. Fast. She was baking bread. Fell right there by the stove. I found her when I came in from checking the north fence. Held her while the ambulance came. Held her after. Held her until they made me let go. The grief is real. Heavy. Sits on my chest like a boulder. 52 years married. You don't just lose a wife. You lose the person who knew every version of you. Who remembered things you forgot. Who finished your sentences and loved you anyway. But even in that fog of grief, I remembered something. The night she started that ledger, the way she said those words. Love is a gift. Everything else is debits and credits. And now here they are, my successful children, sitting at her table, making plans to take her farm, to ship me off to Florida, to divide up everything she loved while the dirt on her grave is still fresh. Brian's still talking. Something about market conditions and tax implications. How the farm is really more of a liability than an asset at this point. How they're doing me a favor. Chloe has the Sunset Villas brochures open again, pointing to a kidney-shaped pool, describing the activities, the golf courses, the freedom from responsibility. She makes it sound like paradise, like rescue, like I should be grateful. Dad, you just need to trust us, Brian says, sliding a paper across the table. Some kind of power of attorney document, already drawn up, ready for my signature. We're just trying to protect your assets. I look at them. My 50-year-old legal genius and my 47-year-old real estate queen. They're so confident, so sure of themselves, so certain that I'm just an old farmer who doesn't understand their world of EBITDA and LLCs. They see a grieving old man, an easy target, someone who needs protection from himself. They think because Mary is gone, the accounting is closed, that the books are settled, that death erased the debts. They think they know what Mary left behind. The farm, the equipment, the modest savings account. They've probably already calculated their inheritance, already decided how to spend it, already moved on. What they don't know is what she left me. Not just memories, not just grief, not just 52 years of love. She left me something else. Something she'd been building for 30 years. Since that night Brian walked into this kitchen smiling after we paid $15,000 to save his career. They don't know she left me the final quarterly report. The next week, they launched what I started calling Operation Drive Dad Crazy. That's exactly what it felt like. A coordinated campaign. Military precision. They had tactics. They had strategy. They had a timeline. And they had no idea who they were messing with. Brian moved into the guest room. Said he was taking a few weeks off work to help me through this difficult transition. Transition. That's the word he kept using. Like I was a company being acquired. Like grief was just a phase in a business deal that needed proper management. Chloe came by every morning. Brought coffee from that fancy place in town. The kind that costs $8 and tastes like burnt optimism. She'd sit at the table. Mary's table. Talk about her concern for me. About how I seemed confused, disoriented, not myself. The thing is, I was disoriented. I was confused. My wife of 52 years was gone. The woman who knew where I kept everything. Who remembered everyone's birthday. Who could find my reading glasses when I'd been looking for 20 minutes, and they were on top of my damn head the whole time. But being sad isn't the same as being senile. Being lonely isn't the same as being incompetent. They didn't understand that. Or maybe they did. Maybe that was the whole point. It started small. Chloe helping in the kitchen, being useful, being present. Then she'd find something, a bill I supposedly forgot to pay. She'd hold it up like evidence in a trial. Dad, this electric bill. It's 3 weeks overdue. They're threatening to shut off service. How did you miss this? I paid that bill online the Tuesday before Mary died. Set it up automatic years ago. But Chloe had the paper bill, the one that comes even when you pay online. The one I throw away because it says account paid right at the top. Except this one didn't say that. This one looked past due, looked urgent, looked like proof. I checked my bank account that night. Bill was paid, exactly when it was supposed to be. I showed Chloe the confirmation number, the timestamp, the electronic receipt. She smiled, hugged me, said she was so relieved. Said she must have grabbed an old bill by mistake. Said she was just worried about me. Said grief makes us all a little forgetful and she wanted to help. But I saw something in her eyes. Something calculating. She was relieved I'd paid the bill. She was disappointed her evidence didn't hold up. That's when I understood. This wasn't about helping. This was about building a case. The keys to my pickup disappeared 3 days later. I always keep them on the hook by the door. Same hook for 30 years. Muscle memory walks me to that hook. But they weren't there. Brian found them in the refrigerator, next to the milk. Dad, we need to talk about this. You put your truck keys in the fridge. That's not normal. That's concerning. What if you tried to drive somewhere? What if you'd gotten confused on a road? I didn't put those keys in the refrigerator. I know where I put my keys. But how do you prove you didn't do something? How do you prove a negative? That's lawyer logic. Brian knew exactly what he was doing. They used my grief like a weapon. Every tear became evidence of instability. Every quiet moment became concerning behavior. Every time I wanted to be alone became isolation that needed intervention. They wanted me to believe I was falling apart, that without Mary I was nothing, couldn't function, couldn't manage, couldn't survive. And here's the thing, part of me felt that way. Part of me believed it. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. reaching for her. I'd make 2 cups of coffee out of habit. I'd start to tell her something and turn around and she wasn't there. She was never going to be there again. The grief was real. The loss was crushing. But there's a difference between sorrow and stupidity, between mourning and incompetence. My wife died. I didn't. The bank meeting was the breaking point. The moment I understood this wasn't just about concern. This was war. Brian scheduled it. Said the bank manager wanted to review my accounts. Standard stuff after a spouse passes. Estate planning. Beneficiary updates. Normal procedure. I should have known better. Should have seen it coming. But I was tired. So damn tired. Tired of being watched. Tired of defending myself in my own house. Tired of proving I was competent to the children I raised. So I went. The bank manager was Chad. Actually, named Chad. 29 years old. Went to high school with Chloe's youngest. Wore a suit that cost more than my first tractor. Had a handshake like a dead fish and a smile like a game show host. I've been banking there 40 years. Since before Chad was born. Since before his parents met. I took my first farm loan from Mr. Patterson back in 1983. Paid it off early. Built a relationship. Built trust. Built a reputation. But Mr. Patterson retired. Died a few years back. Now the bank was run by kids in expensive suits who learned everything they know from computers and nothing from experience. We sat in Chad's office. Glass walls. Everyone could see in. Theater, not privacy. Brian sat next to me. Chloe on the other side. Like guards. Like handlers. Chad pulled up my accounts on his computer. Started talking about balances. About activity. About patterns. All very professional. All very concerned. Then Brian started talking. Not to me. About me. Like I wasn't sitting right there. Like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person to be respected. Chad, we're worried. Dad's been acting strange since Mom passed. Forgetting things. Making unusual decisions. We just want to make sure the accounts are protected. That he doesn't make any impulsive choices during this vulnerable time. Vulnerable. That word again. Like being sad made me incompetent. Like grief erased 50 years of running a successful farm. Like losing my wife somehow meant I'd lost my mind too. Chad nodded along. So understanding. So sympathetic. Asked if I considered a financial advisor. Someone to help manage things during this difficult transition. Maybe give Brian and Chloe temporary access to the accounts. Just to help. Just to protect me from myself. I sat there. In the bank where I'd done business for 40 years. Where I'd borrowed money to buy my first combine. Where I'd saved for my kids' college. Where Mary and I had planned our retirement. And my children were trying to convince a kid young enough to be my grandson that I was incompetent. I looked at Brian, at his expensive suit and his confident smile. At the way he leaned forward like he was closing a deal. At how comfortable he was betraying his father in public. I looked at Chloe, at her concerned face that didn't match her calculating eyes, at the manila folder she had ready, probably full of more evidence, more bills I supposedly forgot, more proof I was falling apart. I looked at Chad, at his uncertainty, at how much he wanted to believe the successful lawyer and the real estate agent instead of the old farmer in work boots. That's when something shifted. Some weight I'd been carrying. Some pretense I'd been maintaining. The idea that this was about concern, about love, about family taking care of family. It wasn't. This was about money, about inheritance, about two successful children who'd been waiting for their parents to die so they could cash in, and they were tired of waiting. I stood up, slow. My knees hurt. Arthritis. Real arthritis, not the kind you fake for sympathy. Everyone looked surprised. I hadn't said a word the whole meeting, hadn't defended myself, hadn't argued. I looked at Chad, at this kid who thought he understood business because he could read a spreadsheet, who thought 40 years of relationship meant nothing compared to one conversation with a lawyer. My accounts stay exactly as they are. My children get no access, no authority, no involvement. If you have concerns about my competency, you're welcome to require a professional evaluation. I'll take any test you want. But until then, my money stays my money. My decisions stay my decisions. And my children can buy their own damn coffee. The silence was beautiful. Absolute. You could hear the air conditioning, the computers humming, someone's phone buzzing in the lobby. Then I left, drove myself home, in my truck, with the keys I'd taken from the hook by the door. The hook where I always kept them, where I'd always know where they were. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, at the water stain shaped like Nebraska that Mary always said looked more like a chicken, at the fan that clicked every third rotation, at the darkness that felt heavier without her breathing next to me. They thought I was broken, thought grief made me weak, thought losing Mary meant losing everything. They were wrong. Mary didn't make me weak. She made me strong. And she made sure I'd stay strong even after she was gone. I got up, 2 a.m, house quiet except for Brian snoring in the guest room. I went to Mary's desk, the one she'd sat at for 50 years, where she kept the farm books, where she balanced our life in columns of numbers that always somehow worked out. I didn't pull out the leather ledger. Not yet. That was for later, for the right moment, for when they pushed too far and needed to understand exactly how far was too far. I pulled out her other files, the ones labeled property documents, legal papers, estate planning, the boring stuff that accumulates over decades of owning land, of building a life. Chloe said I didn't understand assets. Maybe she was right. I understand land. I understand soil and weather and the gamble you take every year that nature will cooperate and markets will hold and you'll break even one more season. But Mary understood both. She understood land and money, assets and liabilities, what things were worth and what they could become. She used to say something, one of those phrases she picked up from her father, the one that never quite made sense to me until now. Never sell the land, Arthur. Sell what's on it, or what's over it. I found what I was looking for. Correspondence going back 5 years. Letters, proposals, offers, all from the same company. Nebraska Solar Solutions. They wanted our land, not to buy, to lease, to cover with solar panels, to turn our farm into an energy generator. Mary said no every time, said she didn't trust it, said the technology wasn't ready, said we were farmers, not power plants, said no so many times they finally stopped asking. But the last letter was different, dated 6 months before she died, newer numbers, better terms, and a note in her handwriting. Arthur might need this someday. The children won't understand. They never do. I sat at her desk until sunrise, reading proposals, reading projections, reading about lease rates and energy production and 20-year contracts, about how farmland in Nebraska was perfect for solar, about how the technology had finally caught up with the theory, about how much money someone could make turning sunshine into electricity. The kids thought my trips to Omaha were for my arthritis, doctor appointments for an old man's aching joints. They were half right. I was in pain, but not the kind that shows up on x-rays. I was in the pain of losing the only person who ever really knew me, and I was in the pain of watching my children turn into strangers. Strangers who looked at their grieving father and saw an obstacle, an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. But those trips to Omaha weren't about doctors. They were about lawyers, the kind who don't wear $1,000 suits, who work in small offices above hardware stores, who've been practicing law in Nebraska for 40 years and know every trick, every loophole, every way to protect what's yours from people who think they deserve it. And they were about meetings with people who wore work boots like mine, who understood land, who understood that the best crop isn't always the one you plant. Sometimes it's the one that falls from the sky every single day for free. People from Nebraska Solar Solutions. Mary always said no to them. I respected that, respected her judgment, respected her caution. But Mary also left me that note, left me those files, left me a roadmap for the day when saying no wasn't enough anymore. The children were looking at houses in Florida, kidney-shaped pools and golf courses, manufactured paradise for disposable parents. I was looking at energy production reports, at statistics on sunlight hours in Nebraska, at projections for what 300 acres could generate, could earn, could secure. They thought they were pushing me towards sunset villas, toward giving up, toward accepting that my useful life was over and all that remained was managed decline. They had no idea they were pushing me toward something else entirely, toward a decision Mary had prepared for, toward a solution she researched and documented and left for me to find when I finally needed it. Brian kept talking about protecting my assets, about making sure I didn't do anything impulsive, about the family's financial future. What he didn't know was that I was already protecting those assets, just not the way he imagined, not in any way that would benefit him or his sister or their plans for my retirement in Florida. The children looked at the fields and saw dirt, saw something to be sold and spent and divided. I looked at the same fields and saw something different, saw what Mary had seen, saw what she'd been preparing me to see all along. I saw the sky. 2 weeks later, I got the letter. Official, legal, typed on expensive paper with a law firm's letterhead that took up half the page. The kind of letter that's designed to intimidate before you even read the words. Petition for conservatorship. That's what they called it. A fancy legal term for what it really was. My children were trying to have me declared incompetent, trying to take control of my assets, trying to make it official that their old man couldn't be trusted to manage his own life. Brian's firm wasn't handling it. Too obvious. Too messy. Instead, they'd hired someone from Omaha. Big firm. The kind that advertises during the evening news. The kind that has their lawyers' faces on billboards like they're selling used cars instead of legal services. The meeting was scheduled at their office. Neutral ground, they called it. Nothing neutral about it. Walking into their conference room was like walking into enemy territory. All glass and steel. Abstract art that cost more than a combine. Coffee that tasted like it was brewed with liquid gold and pretension. Brian and Chloe were already there, sitting on one side of a table that could have seated 20. They'd brought their lawyer. His name was Marcus. Looked like he'd been assembled in a factory that made game show hosts. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect suit that probably cost what I paid for my first truck. He had that smile, the one lawyers practice in the mirror, the one that says I'm here to help while their meter is running $300 an hour. Mr. Henderson. Arthur. May I call you Arthur? He didn't wait for an answer. Slid into the chair across from me, like we were old friends about to discuss something unfortunate but necessary, like putting down a sick dog. All compassion and zero sincerity. I appreciate you coming today. I know this must be difficult, but your children are concerned, deeply concerned, and frankly, after reviewing the incidents they've documented, I share those concerns. He had a folder. Of course he had a folder. Thick one, probably padded with billable hours and recycled arguments. He opened it like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Lost car keys found in the refrigerator. Unpaid bills. Confusion about dates. Erratic behavior following your wife's passing. Arthur, these are classic signs of cognitive decline. No one's blaming you. This happens, but we need to protect you. Protect your assets before something unfortunate occurs. I sat there, listened, Watch Brian and Chloe nod along like concerned children instead of the vultures they become. Watch Marcus build his case with confidence that comes from never having been punched in the mouth. There's a saying I heard once: never argue with a fool. People might not know the difference. Usually good advice. But sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to show them exactly what kind of fool they're dealing with. Brian cleared his throat. His turn. He'd probably rehearsed this part. Dad, we have a right to our inheritance. Mom's gone. The farm is falling apart. You're not capable of managing it anymore. We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to protect what's ours. What Mom and you built. What we're entitled to. Entitled. There's that word again. The one that defined my children's whole approach to life. The belief that they deserved things they hadn't earned. That being born gave them ownership of what others had built. Chloe jumped in. Tag team. They'd coordinated this. We just want to make sure this state is preserved. That there's something left when the time comes. You understand, don't you, Daddy? Daddy. She hadn't called me that since she was 12. Now she pulled it out like a weapon. Like sentiment could hide the knife. I let them talk. Let them present their case. Let Marcus explain the legal framework. Let Brian detail their concerns. Let Chloe add her worry with tears that probably took practice to produce on command. Then I reached into my bag. The canvas one Mary bought me 20 years ago. Still worked. Still held what I needed. Still carried the weight of truth. I pulled out the ledger. Mary's ledger. Leather-bound. Worn soft from 30 years of entries. The pages inside filled with her perfect handwriting. Her perfect accounting. Her perfect memory of every single time our children had treated us like an ATM machine with unconditional approval. I set it on that expensive conference table. It looked out of place. Old. Used. Real. Not like anything else in that room. Marcus looked confused. Brian and Chloe looked nervous. They knew that book. They'd seen it on Mary's desk. But they'd never known what was inside. Never bothered to ask. Never imagined their mother was documenting every loan. Every gift that wasn't a gift. Every time they came back for more. You want to talk about inheritance? I said it quiet. Calm. The way you talk when you're holding all the cards and the other players just realize they're playing poker, not checkers. This is my children's inheritance. The one they've already received. Go ahead, Marcus. Open it. He looked at Brian, at Chloe, at me, then opened the ledger like it might explode. Started reading. His perfect lawyer face started cracking around the edges. This is a financial ledger. It appears to document various loans and transactions dating back to 1995. I finished for him. June 15th, 1995. That's when it starts. That's when my son Brian got his DUI. When we paid $15,000 to make it disappear. $15,000 we didn't have. Took it from the farm equipment fund. Made do with a broken combine for another year. Turned to page 12. I told him, you'll find Chloe's wedding. $40,000. To a musician who left her 14 months later. Marriage failed. Money gone. Wedding dress still in her closet at home because she couldn't bear to look at it. Marcus turned pages, his face getting paler. This is highly unusual. Page 28, I continued. Brian's house down payment. $110,000. Because young lawyers don't make what they thought, and banks want 20% down, and his credit wasn't quite good enough on its own. Page 34. Chloe's essential oils business. $85,000. The one that was going to make her a millionaire. Lasted 6 months. Left her bankrupt. Left us holding another bill. I pulled out copies. Handed them to Marcus. Let him see the documentation. The dates. The amounts. The signatures. My wife was a bookkeeper, Marcus. A damn good one. She kept perfect records. And she made sure every loan was documented. Made the kids sign promissory notes. Just for tax purposes, she told them. They signed without reading because Mom would never trick them. Except she wasn't tricking them. She was protecting us. Protecting what we'd built from the only real threat we ever faced. Our own children's entitlement. Brian found his voice. Sputtering. Angry. Scared. Those were gifts. You gave us that money. You can't just retroactively call them loans. Oh, but I said, because they weren't gifts. They were loans against future inheritance. Says so right in the paperwork your mother had you sign. Says so in the promissory notes. Says so in every document that's legally binding and notarized and absolutely enforceable. Marcus was reading, really reading now, his lawyer brain working overtime, seeing the trap, seeing how perfectly Mary had built it, how airtight it was, how his clients had just walked into a legal nightmare while trying to prove their father was incompetent. If my math is correct, I said, and it is correct because it's Mary's math, my children owe the estate approximately $400,000. That's principal. Mary was very careful about interest rates, set them above market rate. For motivation, she said, with 30 years of compound interest, we're looking at closer to $610,000. The silence was beautiful. Absolute. You could hear the HVAC system. Someone's phone vibrating in another office. The sound of a legal strategy collapsing like a house built on sand. Brian tried again. Desperate now. We're your children. You can't collect debts from your own children. I looked at him, at this 50-year-old man who'd never learned that actions have consequences, that debts need to be paid, that family doesn't mean unlimited access to other people's money. You're absolutely right, I said. I can't, but the state can. And since you've just filed legal paperwork claiming I'm incompetent to manage my assets, well, that sort of forces the issue, doesn't it? I turned to Marcus. His perfect hair looked less perfect now. His confidence had evaporated like morning dew in August. So, counselor, you were saying something about conservatorship? About my inability to manage finances? Funny thing is, seems to me the people with debt problems here aren't me. Seems to me I'm the only one in this room who's financially solvent. Marcus closed his folder. That thick folder full of incidents and evidence and billable hours. Closed it like he was closing a coffin. Mr. Henderson, Arthur, I believe there may have been some miscommunication here. Some misunderstanding about the family's financial situation. Perhaps my clients need to reconsider their position. Perhaps some time for reflection and family discussion would be appropriate before we proceed further with any legal action. That's lawyer speak for we just got destroyed and need to retreat before it gets worse. I stood up. My knees hurt. That arthritis again. But I stood tall, looked at my children, at their perfect clothes and their perfect plans that had just fallen apart, at the greed in their eyes turned to fear as they realized what just happened. You wanted to talk about protecting assets? About the family's financial future? Well, future's looking pretty clear to me. You owe the estate $610,000. That debt is now due. You can pay it back. Or the estate can pursue collection through legal channels. Your choice. Chloe was crying. Real tears this time. Not the manufactured ones from earlier. These were tears of rage and humiliation and the dawning realization that their plan had not just failed. It had backfired spectacularly. Brian was calculating. You could see his lawyer brain working, looking for loopholes, looking for escape routes. Finding none. Mary had been too thorough, too careful, too smart. I picked up the ledger, held it like the weapon it was. The weapon Mary had spent 30 years forging. The weapon she'd left for me to wield at exactly this moment. The meeting's over, I said. My lawyer will be in touch about repayment arrangements. I'm sure you understand. Business is business. Debts are debts. And family? Well, family is complicated. I walked out of that conference room, out of that building, into the parking lot where my truck waited, started it up, drove home, to the farm my children wanted to take, to the land they'd tried to steal, to the future they thought they'd already claimed. They followed me home. Of course they did. Couldn't let it end there. Couldn't accept defeat. Pride wouldn't allow it. Or maybe it was panic. Maybe they'd finally done the math. $610,000. Neither of them had that kind of money. Success and income aren't the same thing. They lived like they were rich. But actual money, actual savings, that was another story. They caught me at the kitchen door. Both of them. No lawyers this time. No practice speeches. Just raw emotion, raw anger, raw fear. You set us up. Chloe screamed it. Actually screamed. The neighbors probably heard. You and Mom. You kept records on us like we were criminals. You trapped us. No, I said, calm as I could manage. We documented loans. We kept records. We protected ourselves. That's what adults do. That's what parents do when their children treat them like an unlimited line of credit. Brian grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough. You can't do this. We're your children. Your only children. You can't destroy us over money. I looked at his hand on my arm. Looked at him. At this man I'd raised. This man who just tried to have me declared incompetent. Who documented my grief and used it as evidence of mental decline. Who'd been willing to take everything I had while putting me in a home in Florida. Let go of my arm. I said it quiet. Dangerous quiet. Before you do something we'll both regret. He let go. Stepped back. Looking at me like he didn't know me. And maybe he didn't. Maybe he'd never known me. Never bothered to look past the old farmer. Never imagined I might have teeth. Fine, Chloe said. Vicious now. Mask completely off. You want to play hardball? You're going to sell the farm anyway. You can't run it alone. You can't maintain it. So sell it. Split the money. Give us what we're owed. What we've earned by putting up with your stubbornness all these years. I almost laughed. Almost. Because she still didn't get it. Still thought this was about the farm as it was about dirt and equipment and 300 acres in Nebraska. Still thought small. Still thought like a real estate agent instead of someone who understood what land could become. Funny you mentioned selling, I said, because you're absolutely right. I can't run this farm forever. I'm 72 years old. Mary's gone. Time to face facts. Time to make changes. Their faces changed. Lit up. They thought they'd won. Thought I'd caved. Thought the old man had finally accepted reality and would divide the spoils. Give them their inheritance so they could pay their debts and still come out ahead. I actually sold it 2 weeks ago. I said it casual, like mentioning the weather. Signed the papers. Finalized the deal. While you were documenting my incompetence and filing your legal motions, I was doing business. The kind of business you don't teach in law school or real estate seminars. Chloe's eyes went wide. Her real estate agent brain kicked into overdrive, calculating, assessing, trying to figure out what I'd done, what it meant, how much money was involved. What? Who did you sell to? How much? She couldn't help herself. Even in defeat, even in panic, she had to know the numbers. Had to know if she could have gotten more. Had to prove she was the expert. You could have gotten $2 million for this place, she said. Maybe more with the right buyer. Please tell me you didn't give it away. Please tell me you at least got fair market value. $2 million, I repeated. Let the number hang there. Let her think she knew what land was worth. Let her believe she understood assets. Then I smiled. First real smile I'd had since Mary died. Felt good. Felt right. Felt like something Mary would have done. Sweetheart, I said, and I meant it as the insult. It was, you sell houses. I sold energy. You looked at dirt. I looked at the sky. What are you talking about? Brian now. Confused. Angry. Scared. Nebraska Solar Solutions, I said. You know them? Big company. Been after this land for 5 years. Mary kept saying no. But Mary also kept their files. Kept their proposals. Kept the door open just enough. Because Mary knew. She always knew. That someday we might need a different kind of harvest. I didn't sell them the farm. I leased them the sky. 99-year lease. They're going to cover 300 acres with solar panels. Turn our land into a power plant. Generate electricity that feeds into the grid. And they're going to pay me. Pay the estate. Pay Mary's trust. How much? Chloe whispered it, afraid of the answer. $22 million. The silence was different this time. Not the silence of defeat. The silence of total shock. Of a number so big it didn't compute. Of realizing they'd been playing checkers while their old man played chess. And won. $22 million, Chloe repeated. Flat. Dead. like her brain couldn't process it. $22 million, I confirmed. Upfront payment, plus annual royalties based on energy production, plus escalation clauses, plus about 100 other things Mary had outlined in her notes, things she'd researched, things she prepared for, things she'd left for me to use when the time came. Brian found his voice, shaky, desperate, trying to regain control. Okay, 22 million. That's good. That's great. So, after you pay us back the 600,000, after the estate is settled, we split the rest. 11 million each. We can all... I held up my hand, stopped him, looked at both of them, at these strangers who carried my DNA, who'd grown up in this house, who'd eaten at that table and played in those fields and received every advantage two poor farmers could scrape together, and learned nothing, understood nothing, appreciated nothing. You really don't get it, I said. You still don't understand. The farm isn't mine. The money isn't mine. The asset isn't mine. It all belongs to the Mary Henderson Memorial Trust, established 6 months before she died. I'm just the trustee. The manager. I don't own it. Can't sell it. Can't give it away. Can only manage it according to Mary's very specific instructions. That's a lie, Chloe shouted. You're making that up. You can't just... I pulled out another document. Been carrying a lot of paper lately. But Mary had prepared me well. Had made sure every piece was in place. Every defense ready. Every trap set. Here's the trust documents. Filed with the county. Notarized. Legal. Binding. Mary transferred all assets to the trust before she died. The farm. The equipment. The mineral rights. Everything. Including your debt. All $610,000 of it. I handed Brian a copy. Watched him read it. Watched his lawyer training kick in. Watched him realize how perfectly constructed it was. How unbreakable. The trust's first action, according to Mary's instructions, is to collect all outstanding debts. That's you too. $610,000. Due and payable. No forgiveness clause. No family discount. Just business. But we're your children. Chloe was crying again. This can't be legal. You can't cut us out of our own inheritance. I'm not cutting you out, I said. Mary's not cutting you out. The trust has very clear provisions for beneficiaries. That's you. You'll get your share. Eventually, after certain conditions are met. What conditions? Brian, lawyer voice, reading the document, finding the clause. 1. You pay back your existing debts to the trust. All $610,000. 2. You undergo a complete financial audit, proving you can manage money responsibly. 3. You maintain stable employment and housing for a minimum of 5 years without requesting additional loans. 4. You attend quarterly financial planning sessions with the trust accountant. And 5. You submit annual reports demonstrating fiscal responsibility and long-term planning. Meet those conditions, I continued, and yes, you'll receive distributions from the trust, calculated, measured, designed to provide for you, without enabling you, designed to teach you what Mary and I failed to teach you growing up. That money isn't free. Success isn't inherited. Value isn't given. It's earned. You can't do this, Brian said, but his voice was weak. He'd read the document, seen how tight it was, how legal, how final. I didn't do it, I said. Mary did. This was her plan, her protection, her final gift to you, teaching you the lesson you should have learned 30 years ago. That love is a gift, but everything else is debits and credits, and debts always come due. They left, finally, had nowhere else to go, nothing else to say, drove away in their expensive cars that they probably owed money on, back to their expensive lives that they'd built on credit and inheritance they'd assumed would always be there. I stood in the driveway and watched them go, felt something I hadn't felt in months, since before Mary died, something like peace, like justice, like the balance she'd always talked about finally being restored. The sun was setting, throwing gold across the fields, the same fields that would soon be covered with solar panels, that would harvest light instead of corn, that would generate energy instead of crops, that would provide security for decades, for my lifetime, for whatever came after. Mary had seen it, had planned it, had prepared for it, had left me every tool I needed to protect what we'd built, to teach our children what they needed to learn, to ensure the farm she loved would continue. Different, changed, but continuing. I went inside, made coffee, Mary's way, sat at her table, looked at her chair, still empty, always would be, but not silent, never silent. I could hear her voice, hear her satisfaction, hear her telling me I'd done good, that we'd won, that the books finally balanced. The next week, I bought the RV. Big one, luxury model, the kind with a bathroom and a kitchen, and a bed you could actually sleep in. Cost more than my first house. Didn't care. Had 22 million reasons not to care. Had it customized. Got a decal for the back window. Fisherman silhouette. Sunset. Ocean waves. And words underneath that made me laugh every time I saw them. Spending my kids' inheritance. One fish at a time. I called Brian and Chloe before I left. One last conversation. One last attempt to be a father instead of a trustee. I'm heading to Florida. I told them. Going to see that ocean you wanted me to look at. Go to enjoy some sun. Some peace. Some time without watching my back for children who see me as an obstacle instead of a parent. Silence on the phone. What could they say? What was left? You can visit, I said, if you want. When you want, doors always open. But you come as my children, not as creditors, not as heirs waiting for me to die. As my children. If you remember how to do that. More silence. Then Chloe spoke. Small voice. Young voice. The daughter I remember from 30 years ago before entitlement and greed took over. Daddy? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We messed up. We thought. I know what you thought, I said. Not unkind. Just honest. You thought grief made me weak. Thought losing Mary meant losing everything. You forgot what she taught me. What 52 years of marriage taught me. That love is a gift, but business is business, and family is both. I hung up, packed the RV. Everything I needed. Everything Mary would have wanted me to have. Photos. Her favorite mug. The quilt her mother made. The ledger. Always the ledger. Evidence of what we'd built. What we'd survived. What we'd won. Drove out that morning. Sun rising over fields that weren't quite mine anymore. Over a farm that would live on in a different form. Over land that Mary had protected. Had planned for. Had ensured would provide. Would teach. Would endure. The sign at the property line needed painting. Been meaning to fix it for years. Mary always said leave it. Said it had character. Said it told the truth about who we were. Simple people. Hard workers. Farmers who understood the land. I stopped the RV. Looked at that sign one last time. Henderson Farm. EST 1973. 52 years of memories. Of work. Of sacrifice. Of love. Of two people who built something worth protecting. Worth fighting for. Worth winning. Then I drove. South. Toward Florida. Toward sunshine and ocean. Toward the paradise my children thought they'd send me to. But I was going on my own terms. In my own time. With my own money. Living the retirement Mary and I had planned. That she'd made possible. That she protected from the only threat that mattered. Our own children's greed. They thought I was some old farmer who didn't understand money. Who needed protection. Who needed management. Who needed to be put somewhere safe where I couldn't make mistakes. They forgot I'd been married to the smartest woman in Nebraska for 52 years. That she'd taught me everything she knew. That she'd planned for everything, including them, especially them. They looked at the ground and saw dirt. I looked at the sky and saw energy. They looked at inheritance and saw entitlement. I looked at legacy and saw responsibility. They thought they were protecting their future. They were, just not the way they imagined. I'm in Florida now. Been here 3 months. Caught more fish than I can count. Met people. Made friends. People who don't care about my farm or my money or my children or my trust. People who just want to fish and talk and watch the sunset and enjoy what time they have left. I talk to Brian and Chloe sometimes. Not often. They're working. Actually working. Brian took extra cases. Chloe's selling houses like her life depends on it. Because it does. They owe $610,000. That's not going away. That lesson's not optional. Maybe they'll learn. Maybe they won't. That's up to them now. Mary and I did our part. Raised them. Educated them. Supported them. Enabled them far too long. But we also taught them. Finally. The hard way. The only way they'd listen. The sun's setting now. Over the Gulf of Mexico. Orange and gold spreading across water that goes on forever. Mary would have loved this. Would have sat here with me. Would have held my hand and watched the light change and felt the peace that comes from knowing you did right. You protected what mattered. You won the fight that needed winning. I've got her picture on the dashboard. Her smile. Her eyes. Her certainty that everything would work out if you planned carefully and kept good records and never forgot that love's a gift. But business? Business is debits and credits. And the books are finally balanced. I'm spending my kids' inheritance on fishing trips and sunsets and RV parks and whatever else I damn well please. And you know what? Mary would approve. She'd laugh. She'd pour me coffee. She'd add it all up in that ledger. And she'd smile. Because the final entry would read, Arthur Henderson, investment in happiness, paid in full,